Ready?
I'm ready.
All right, we're record. It's being recorded. Hey everyone, my name is Josh Levine. I'm author of Great Mondays and culture consultancy called Great Mondays.
And I'm Mary Ellen Stockton, the co-founder of Work Well Wherever. It is also a consultancy business, but we focus on flexibility or workplace flexibility.
And Mary Ellen and I have decided to do a little series of conversations because since we've gotten to know each other, every time we get on the phone, it's such an interesting conversation. We thought we should record these so that the rest of the world can hear our conversations. So we're going to be talking about all sorts of things related to company culture and remote work and the evolution of the two as we kind of move into the next 5 to 10 years and what it holds for us.
Yeah, I hope everybody else thinks this is interesting as we do.
We'll see. You know what? I'll watch it. My mom will watch it. It'll be great.
I know my mom will watch it too. Maybe one friend.
Perfect. Very cool. So I think the first thing that we wanted to talk about is just kind of how we got where we are and what we're doing. I mean, I wrote a book that came out in just at the end of 2018 called Great Mondays, and as you know, a book is a lot of work and it doesn't make you a lot of money, which is like the opposite of all the other things that you're learning from these entrepreneurs. They're like, do a software startup or whatever. So it's like, I must have a real good reason for this. And so what I 10 years ago, I was a brand strategist, or I've been a brand strategist for a long time. And in sort of a career crisis moment, I really had to decide what I wanted to do and what I wanted to focus on. And company culture was what I realized we needed to start to invest in if we want to have these organizations deliver on the brand promises that we had been helping them make. so that was the goal.
I mean, maybe you can't say this, but did you see a lot of ways that culture wasn't working, like that where they were having issues, or just like, or was it more like, I love this stuff and there's something to it, so I'm going to study it and move forward, or a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think it was more the second thing, but definitely saw the kind of the way that organizations broadly were ill-equipped to actually carry out the strategies that we had developed for them. And the marketing departments were great. I mean, they were sort of masters in the 90s and the 2000s. They got really good at mastering brand, and they could follow instructions, and that was great. But what the gap was, the employees didn't understand what that promise was. And so for me, it was like, oh my God, it was literally like a brick falling on my head of like, this is what I want to do. I want to help, like the essence of it was, I want to help more people be happier through their work. That was the start of it all. And then I just was like, well, I better start figuring this out. Like, I didn't know, I wasn't in HR.
Yeah. And did you apply like your brand strategy background to the components of your book?
Yeah, of course. I mean, everything at first I was like, oh crap, this is an entire like shift. I spent an entire decade on brand strategy, and now I wanted to work on culture stuff. But it turns out that the premise is the same. It's a very similar thing, which is, why are you in business? And then if you're talking about brand, then you're going to communicate. You can do everything you can to communicate that to your communities externally. If it's culture, you're going to use everything you can to communicate to your communities internally, and hopefully change behaviors and be able to make decisions, which is the basis of, or the premise of the whole idea. So I don't care. I still have clients that are brand clients. I don't care if you call it brand or culture. It's the same set of tools, and that's why this has started to, luckily for me, this is why it's started to work.
Yeah. Well, and I wanted to tell a little bit about like how we met and this whole, like, what I do and the book that you wrote and all that.
Right. We're on different sides of the country, aren't we?
We're on different sides of the country, but see how this whole remote thing builds a connection?
So I'm in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and you are in the South. You're in Georgia.
Atlanta, GA. That's right.
Atlanta, GA. That's right.
So you're a man of many hats, and you created this Culture Lab X thing, which I'm also a lover of culture. I worked for a virtual staffing firm and really fell into the employee engagement culture, building a community, all those kind of things. So Josh was in Atlanta to give a talk about his book, and I was like, "Oh, what's this about?" So I went, and I don't know if you remember this, but he's going through all the components of his book, and then somebody was like, "Excuse me, can you have a culture in a remote company?" And I was like, and so then I'm like, "Yes, you can, and here's why." And then I came and talked to you after that, and then we've just kind of had little brainstorming sessions ever since.
Yeah. Well, it to me that has been a gap in kind of the experience that I've had and what I've been able to provide is this growing opportunity and growing trend of people working not at the headquarters, let's say, as
Right.
remote. And so it could be everything from, well, we have another office in another city, so you have to have teams collaborating, or although that's sort of the most, I don't know, simple version or like least distributed, all the way to we've got, all these individual contributors that are operating from, 2 hours outside of any metropolitan area.
Right.
And I think and globally, right, internationally, which is also so interesting in all the things that it brings up. So for me, I was like, this is a really interesting question. And so when you came up and were like, I've been thinking about this too, and I was like, yay, that's great, give me a hug. I think that's literally what I did, right? I was like
Yeah.
so excited, I can't contain myself, but I'm like, yay, hug.
I know. I know. And me too, because I think that like your book and like what you're doing provides like the structure to basically for the culture building, and using your book as the structure to apply it to how like a remote or distributed or hybrid, or maybe all these terms that people don't know, but
Right.
basically working together when you're not together, and using your book as a guide for building culture. And there's just so
Yeah.
many, you have to have a guide, right?
That was the idea. Nobody knew how to even define it, and so I was like, I'm gonna take a stab at this and put together some, a framework that people can start to look at and think about and build on.
Yeah. And now, I mean, it is that whole, this is another reason why I think that like our relationship is beautiful, is because there is that whole push, from like the younger generation, and really from me too, even though the younger generation gets coined for it, but of finding purpose in your work. So it's that
Mm-hmm.
culture, or working for companies that align with your purpose and your values. And then also having flexibility to not work all the time, to not just that
Yep.
work is not your only thing. And so those two married together make it a great place to work, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think it was one of your reports that identified that the number one benefit that people want or value in remote work is that flexibility, which is really amazing. It's like a life work thing. I mean, I think it far outstrips anything else, right? You have the flex, like there's sort of ownership of your time is kind of part of that, but also you don't spend time commuting, which is of greater and greater benefit as we have more and more hyper commuters here in the Bay Area, certainly. And I think we're going to see that broadly as well.
Yeah. And then you've got like the whole rise of the gig economy, which is what you're talking about. And it's like a
Yeah,
team has an office, but then they have all these gig workers. And there's also 50% of women in the workforce, which we want them in the workforce and we want to keep them
we
in the
do.
workforce. But they have to have flexibility, or I would say you have to have flexibility for me to keep doing what I'm doing. And you don't have to start your own company to do that, right? I didn't start that way. I mean, but you do, any job I would be looking for if I started over would be to the ability to like work from home at least a couple
Right.
of days.
So how did I mean, so you at some point transitioned from working for somebody else into, taking this idea of starting your own company, ill-advised or otherwise. And what was the impetus? Like, why would you take that kind of risk?
Yeah, I know. Maybe if I had talked to other consultants, I wouldn't have done it. I'm just kidding. I would still do it. I would still do it. There was the bat, like the background was that I had been working for this virtual staffing firm, and we were all remote. It was a fully remote team. So the team was remote, and then we staffed contractors all over the US, right? So you had both, like both things that you're seeing now in this economy. And I'd always wanted to start my own business. And it came to a place, it was like I was really a student of culture, kind of like you starting your own book, like a student of culture. And like, this is fascinating that we can all connect through technology, and you can actually build a relationship with people that you don't see maybe once. I mean, you and I have met once, right? So it's like, okay, like there's something to that. And then I saw a demand, for individuals and companies. It was like, oh, the team, these individuals are going in saying, I want to work from home, and the company doesn't want to lose them, but they don't know where to start. And the individual doesn't know where to start to look for those jobs. So it was a combination of those things. And then I'm a mom of two. And so I wanted to still have my flexibility, and I believe in the future is the future of work, and then it's flexible, and how technology has made that advance and how you can build these connections. And I wanted that to be possible for other people.
Mm-hmm. And so now you are helping other people, individuals and organizations, learn how to actually make this a real productive business tool, not just kind of slapdash decision.
Yeah.
I feel like, which is what mostly has happened, right? Where people are like, I'm a good fit. And you're like, great, you'll know exactly what to do. You just won't be here. And it's not that simple.
I know. And I think, or, because there is like, so a lot of companies maybe don't start. I always say like remote first companies, I feel like are easier, like once they start. When they grow, like, so it's easier once they start, because that trust hurdle that you have to come into when somebody says, comes into your office and says, I want to work from home, is usually already done, especially if that employee has been a bit, like if they've already been working like remotely, then you're not having to overcome that hurdle. So right. These remote first companies, but still, if they don't start with some kind of program in place or ideas of how they want to work and communicate and build their culture and what's important to them and what do they value, if they don't start that from the beginning, then when you grow, it gets super hard.
Yeah. Well, and I would also say that inherent challenge occurs in these hybrid organizations. We have a client right now who has all of the things that I just described. So they have 4 different offices, and they just opened one up in Atlanta, and they have so Atlanta, Toronto, and San Francisco is the home base, and then also I think London. And then they also have all these individual contributors all over the United States, and also Eastern Europe or Western Europe, maybe. And so it's like all these teams are like, well, we've got a group here, and then 3 individuals here, and then someone working from a WeWork space that's actually near here and comes in sometimes, right? So it's like, it's very complex, and it is the biggest mistake that I've observed, and since you're the expert, you can agree or disagree, is the assumption that we just inherently know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We know how to collaborate. Hey, you're a professional. You're going to come together, and then you're a professional on the screen. That's it. That's all.
Right. And it's not, it depends on, I guess, like also like what you're seeking, right? Like what does your company, what is their purpose? What are their values? And then it's kind of like, okay, and then how do you want that to translate to your employees? Remote, freelance, that work in 4 different offices, all of those things are important. And the culture, as we talk about, I think that you have a quote in there that is like, about culture is your only competitive advantage. Like I think that's like something along those lines. Like, did I butcher it?
No, that's great.
No. So, and I wholeheartedly was like, yes, like culture is your only competitive advantage. Like for you, for me, what we build, what we create, and in a remote environment where you've got, these freelancers and separate offices and a corporate headquarters, you know what? You want to compete. So you better figure
Yeah.
out, like, with your
Yeah.
culture, what do you want? How do you want your employees to feel? How do you want your employees to project your company? And so I do think that people, they just start growing and there's no plan in place, and so they
Right.
grow remotely or grow offices, and then it's like, wait a minute, we now have like 400 people and they're all over the place and I have no idea what to do.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think this is interesting, and we're going to continue to have this conversation. So over the next, I don't know, we've got a couple sessions planned that we'll release, I think we said weekly maybe.
Yeah.
And we'll use my book as a framework, the 6 components. And then Mary Ellen's going to be talking all about how remote works within those different components. And we'll explore culture together and just kind of see where the conversation goes.
I'm excited.
All right. So next up, next week we'll release one on the first component of culture, purpose. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.